Okay, we're good now.
Okay. Give me a minute to get caught up. So this is Councilor Bill Solms. I'm calling this regular meeting of the Lakeview Town Council Finance Committee to order. Present are myself, Councilor Ingalls. We're waiting on Councilor Tim Ryan. Also present are Councilor Mary McGrattan, Board of Ed member, and Town Councilor Naomi Rodriguez, board members. Everybody's moving out of order. Alex Rohde. And I see Business Director from Board of Ed, Rachel Mosier. And our Auditor, Nikoleta McTigue from CLLA,
Hey.
right?
Yep.
And Matthew B. Matthew B, could you identify your last name, please?
Cronin.
Oh, Matt. Yeah. Right.
Matt Bonin, yep.
That's Town Council
And you
Finance.
doing the new Marcia.
Yeah, Town Finance Director, Matt Bonin. And the mayor just joined, as well as former, I hate to say that, Finance Director Marcia Hancock. And I think that's everybody. And Town Council Administrative Assistant. Who?
Tim Ryan.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, Tim Ryan.
Bronner's here,
Right.
Bill.
And hi, Mike. How are you?
Good. How you doing tonight?
Good. Okay, so we are going to get started. We have a presentation from our auditors, CLLA, and our good news is that our audit was completed on time, submitted on time this year. Great job, everybody. And Nikoleta, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening, everybody. I have prepared a short summary of the audit, and I'll share my screen. So give me a second to share the file.
Okay. Take your time, and while you're doing that, I'll add Juliet Hodge has joined. And I just saw someone else. Now I've lost it. Go ahead.
I'm not sure which screen you see, the one that has two, like a bigger and a smaller presentation, or the one that has just one page?
The 2 pages.
The 2 pages.
So if you do if you try to do PowerPoint slideshow, it doesn't always work with Zoom.
Yeah. So, but I hope you guys don't mind.
No, we can see both.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, I'll start with the agenda. I'll go over the audit scope, reporting results, some financial highlights, and single audits, and required communications. I'll go over a management advisory letter, and the last slide just has my contact information. So we were engaged to give an opinion on whether the basic financial statement were presented fairly in accordance to GAAP, to express an opinion in relation to the financial statement related to the schedule of expenditures of federal awards and schedule of expenditures of state financial assistance, and to express an opinion on compliance related to major federal and state programs that we tested. In addition to those, we were engaged to provide a report on internal controls over financial reporting and compliance with laws and regulations as required by the government auditing standards, and to provide a report on internal controls over compliance related to major federal programs and state major programs that we tested. The reporting results, all good. Under generally accepted account auditing standards, we issued an unmodified opinion on the basic financial statements. The opinion contained 2 paragraphs that we call them emphasis of matter paragraph, to emphasize the fact that there were 2 restatements in the financial statements, but either of the restatement did not cause our opinion to be modified. So the opinion was unmodified. The first restatement was related to GASB number 84 fiduciary activity. So implementation of that GASB required that student activities and scholarship funds that were previously reported as agency funds to now be reported as special revenue funds. So the net position and fund balance of governmental activities and governmental funds were restated for that change. Another restatement immaterial to the financial statement was related to the capital assets that were previously not capitalized. As a result of an inventory that the town did, there were few capital assets. Actually, they were quite old, but they were not included in the inventory listing. So the addition of those assets in the list required a restatement of the financial statement. Again, neither of the restatements caused us to modify our opinion. Under government auditing standards, as I mentioned, we require to issue an internal control report on internal control over financial reporting, and that report is we did not identify any deficiencies. If you remember in the past, there was a significant deficiency over financial reporting, so that does not is not there anymore. So good job, that one was remediated. And as far as the internal controls over compliance and compliance findings for the state and federal single audits, we had none. So everything, all our reports were clean. We had a couple management advisory later comments that I will talk later in the presentation, but as far as any finding either significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, none of that, so everything was clean. In the next slide, I have a summary of the government-wide financial statements. So this is summary for the whole town. Under governmental activities, the first two columns comparatively are all the funds of the town. And with exception of the fiduciary funds, and under business type activities are the enterprise funds, water, sewer of the town. So overall, as you can see here, the net position, and I have some numbers in the next slide and explanations, the net position went from $84.8 million to $87.9 million. And on the next slide, I listed some of the major factors that played a role into that change. Capital assets decreased by $1.2 million to $137.5 million, and that was mostly because depreciation expense exceeded capital asset additions for the year. So there were capital assets added to the inventory, but the depreciation exceeded the additions. Net pension liability remained visually the same at about $5.3 million. Total other post-employment benefits, or as we call it, OPEB liability, increased by $3.5 million to $16.3 million at year end. And that the main reason for that was that the discount rate decreased from 3.5% to 2.21%. The discount rate for an unfunded OPEB plan is connected to the index rate of the 20-year tax exempt general obligation municipal bond. And if that percentage goes down, so does the discount rate that is used for calculating liabilities for your OPEB plan. General obligation bonds and notes, including their premium, decreased by $1 million. During the year, there were $4 million of new general obligation bonds issued. In this slide, I listed the fund balance by major fund. So the combined all governmental funds had a total fund balance of $228,000, of which $5 million was in general fund. Capital projects had a negative of $8.6 million, and non-major governmental fund, so all the other special revenue funds and capital project funds had a total of $3.8 million in fund balance at year end. The change year over year is for the general fund. The fund balance increased about $384,000. And in To note, in the general fund, there is an unassigned fund balance of $4.5 million that represents 7% of the total general fund expenditures and transfers out, and that is in line with what was last year. Capital projects, total fund balance increased by $2.5 million, or I should say the negative fund balance decreased by $2.5 million. And that was primarily due to new bonds issued of about $4 million for school projects. Under non-governmental funds column, the change for the year was about $761,000, and that increase was primarily due to the transfer into those funds of $596,000 from the Mill Rate Stabilization Fund. The next slide, I summarize some information for the general fund budgetary results. Property tax collections were at $39.4 million, and which represented $160,000 higher than budget. Current year levy collections were $38.6 million, or 100.5% compared to 98.11% in the prior fiscal year. Total revenues and transfers in were lower than budgetary estimates by $766,000, and expenditures were $1.4 million lower than budgeted appropriations. And that was as a result of the budgetary compliance in every expenditure function. During the year, additional appropriations were $206,000, and they were funded by fund balance. Included in the financial statement, there is a section for business type activities or enterprise funds, which are water and sewer, and internal service fund. In this slide, I put the final results for total net position of the fund. The water fund had a final net position of $17.5 million, sewer $4.4 million, and internal service fund $453,000. And I put there on the last line is a change in the net position year over year. So changes were very small, decrease in all of them, but a small amount of decrease. Fiduciary net position includes the financial statements for pension trust fund. Net position of pension trust fund increased by 5.9, I think it's million dollars. I think I have a typo there, to $32 million. Employer contributions for the fund were $1.1 million, and they are in line with actuarially determined contributions. Net investment earnings for the year were $6.3 million. So the fund had a really good year, or at least as of June 30th, 2021, it was very good. Benefit payments and administration expenses were about $1.6 million, and those numbers are very comparative to prior year. So this is a summary of the financial statement results and some highlights. In the next couple slides, I'll go over state and federal single audit results. I don't know if you want me to stop here for any questions or continue and leave the questions for the end. Yeah, I'll continue.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
Could you go back to slide 6?
Yep.
Okay, so the net pension liability is that correct?
Yes. So my screens are kind of black now, but I had my financials open on the other screen. If I make this smaller. I'll just go to the page that says the change. Oh. You are absolutely right. That's $109,000. But I have to make a correction on my presentation. Sorry, I picked the wrong number, at the beginning instead of the end. And when I compared it, it was the same. I'm so sorry about that.
That's
That's
okay.
okay. I thought one or two slides before that, you said net pension liability went down.
No,
Yes,
actually,
so
yes.
then, yes. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Happy to
Thank
see
you,
it.
thank you, Marcia, for bringing that up. And I'll correct it right now. And Roxanne, if you don't mind to make the same correction or just delete that line because I already. Okay, sorry, I think I used the presentation from prior year. I forgot to delete the line.
Could you go back to the slide that showed it going down, Nikoleta? I think it was 2 or 3 back.
Yep.
No, maybe not. I know I saw it.
Actually, I did not even talk about that here because I just didn't. I only
Maybe
talked
you read
about.
it out from the. You might have read it out from the spreadsheet just before that. I know you said it because I wrote down a note.
Yes, I apologize for that.
So
But
what
yeah.
is the number for liability now?
It's 100. Actually, it's a net pension asset of $109,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the financials? And again, I apologize for that. Thank you, Marcia, for catching it.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so as I mentioned, in addition to the financial statement audit, we did a state single audit and a federal single audit. State single audit awards for the year were at $15.9 million, and of that, subject to test was only $2.4 million. And I put their comparative numbers for the prior year, 16.9 versus $3.1 million. Major programs that we tested for the current year were Town Aid Road, reimbursement on tax laws. Oh, I have another typo there. On state-owned property and vocational agriculture grant. The results for the state single audit, we expressed an unmodified opinion on compliance for major programs tested, and there were no findings on internal controls over major program. Federal single audit, federal awards expended were $3.4 million versus $2.8 million in the prior year. We tested 2 programs, Impact Aid and the ESSER grant, that's a COVID-19 grant. For both programs that we tested, we expressed an unmodified opinion on compliance for major programs, and we did not identify any findings on internal control over major programs tested. So as usual, we are required to have certain communications to those charged with governance, to your board. You received maybe 3 or 4 page report related to that. I'll go over high level of what's included in that report. And all the section, all the bullet points here are the required communications. So as far as qualitative aspects of accounting practices go, I mentioned that that the town implemented GASB 84 fiduciary activities for the year. The report includes several estimates, and they're listed here: net pension liability, total OPEB liability, depreciation expense, and allowance for doubtful accounts are for significant estimates included in the report. Excuse me. We did not encounter any difficulties performing the audit. There was only one uncorrected misstatement, which was immaterial to financial statements, related to deferred outflows for contributions subsequent to measurement date for OPEB plan. So this amount, in the future, if it becomes material to the financial statement, the management should consider adding that in the financial statements. There were some immaterial misstatements, some immaterial journal entries that we did as far as the audit. And I think that were given to you on PDF with a package of the audit that I mailed a while back to Marcia. We did not have any disagreement with management. Management signed representation letters for the audit. We are not aware of any consultations with other independent accountants. There were no significant issues discussed with management prior to engagement. And there were no significant findings that were discussed or subject of correspondence with management. We issued a management advisory letter, which I'll go over in the next slide. And the other required communication is related to the information contained in the audited financial statements. So not every single page of the audited financial statements is actually subject to the audit. Requires supplementary information, so all the 10-year information for pension OPEB and everything that's included on the required supplementary information. Introductory section and statistical information are not required to be audited, and we do not express an opinion on those schedules or exhibits. Combining in the individual financial statements and schedules, schedule of expenditures for federal assistance and schedule of expenditures for state assistance, we give an opinion in relation to financial statements. So the opinion is on the basic financial statements, and the rest, either there's no opinion or we give an opinion in relation to the basic financial statements. Next slide, I have listed the comments from the management advisory letter. The first one has to do with bank reconciliations related to Board of Education. So during our audit, we noted that reconciliations were not done properly or in timely manner, and there was no indication of supervisory review. So the reviews, if they happen, unless there is some documentation for it, we would not know that that was done. So this was the only new comment for the current year, and we repeated a couple or three findings from the prior year. The first one was related again to the accounting for Board of Education, related to special revenue fund accounting, and more specifically education grant and school lunch fund. So there were numerous adjustments that were needed to make sure that the final numbers were the correct numbers for these two funds. Information technology controls, again, that's the same comment as prior year. To create a document, a formal termination process of employees, required employee review and sign off of IT policies on more regular basis, and update and test a comprehensive disaster recovery plan. Also included in the prior year was a comment related to uniform guidance procurement standards for both town and Board of Ed. They need to be updated to be in compliance with uniform guidance. And in the next two slides, I listed the GASB standards that are going to be applicable in the next couple of years. I'm not going to bore you going through them. They are very comprehensive, but I just wanted to bring to your attention statement 87 leases, and I believe I mentioned that last year. Finally, it's here, ready to be implemented, and it will require some work from management to make sure that all the computations are done correctly, financial disclosures are done correctly, and the auditor also is going to require extra work comparatively to what was done in the past related to leases to do the computations again and to audit what management has done. And the next slide are implementations for 2023. The only one I wanted to mention here is Statement 96, which is very similar to Statement 87 leases, but since the statement did not include anything related to subscription-based information technology arrangements, they now have their own statement on how to be treated. It's very, very similar accounting-wise and financial disclosures to the leases, but since they were not included there, their statement on their own. And on the last slide, there's my contact information, phone number, and email, should you have any questions. That's my prepared presentation for today.
Thank you, Nikoleta. I'll open it up to questions from councilors first and Board of Ed members as well.
Counselor Solms, I have a question. This is hopefully an easy one. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Way back at the beginning under capital assets, Nikoleta, you mentioned that there were a few capital assets that were quite old that were not included in the inventory. Was that something you found in prior years too? I'm just curious about just sort of how that happens. Because it just seems like the internal list would carry year to year.
Yeah, so actually that was not discovered by us, was the management that discovered the items that were missing through, I believe, Marsha, you can chime in there. You hired the third party to do a full and comprehensive inventory of capital assets. It just happened way back when those items were not included.
That's right. Okay, I'm
Yes.
recalling now.
So to give a little context to that, Andra, back in whatever year GASB 34 was
34, yep.
a long time ago. Part of that
2004.
was showing your capital assets. Municipalities never had to do that before. And so from what I could tell when I came here, that list had been pulled together very quickly by previous finance directors or of previous finance director perhaps. And some items just didn't make it onto that list. Several buildings and water and sewer facilities, pump houses, small things like that. So when the company that we hired to do the inventory came 2 years ago, they picked up those buildings, and so that's why they were all added at one time and had just been missed over the years.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm remembering that now. You're bringing that back, that we did hire someone to inventory. Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Andra. Other questions? Okay, if anybody's commenting, it looks like everybody's mute, so. I have a couple of comments and questions. I wrote a note about the pension benefits, the obligations declining, because that's really good news for us. And I recall quite a few years ago, the town was in really difficult shape regarding its pension obligations, and we've made really steady progress in catching up. And it's nice to see the town in good shape after a long, determined effort. It looks like total bonds decreased. So I assume that means that the payments associated with those bonds are now declining. I believe last year was our peak year for bond payments. Is that correct, Marcia?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that also good news. Thank you.
But if you remember last week, the council approved more more bonding.
Yeah, I know.
So
I know,
don't
but
hold your breath.
I know. Also, the fund balance increase, we're at 7%. We really want to be at 10, and some of the recommendations we're getting are 15%. We had a rough patch there a year and a half ago or 2 years, where we actually, I think, declined, but I'm glad to see that we've stabilized again. And the Finance Committee's goal is to continue to increase to get to at least 10% for undesignated. Question about taxes, tax rate collection at 100.5%. Does that mean we collected more taxes than we budgeted to collect? Anybody?
I'm going to the page.
Off the top of my head, I would say, yeah.
So here are the numbers. It looks like the delinquent tax collection, like prior year collections, went up.
Okay. Meaning we collected delinquent taxes from years before that were counted this year?
Yes.
Okay, good. Also good. Last question. Could you tell us more, Nikoleta, about what uniform guidance procurement standards are and how that relates to our policies and our ordinances? What do we need to do?
So basically that the uniform guidance required that every non-federal entity that receives federal programs to have a written procurement policy. So you have your own written procurement policy for the town for purchases that are not federal funded purchases.
Yep.
But for anything that's a federally funded purchase, there are certain criteria that need to be, or items that need to be included in your procurement policy, and they apply only to purchases for federally funded items.
Okay.
So they have the list is quite long. They are dollar limits, or when you can go out to bid, when you can just ask for quotes and stuff like that, and certain language that should be included in your contracts related to either minority businesses, and the list is quite long, but the uniform guidance is there and available to just open it up and see all the requirements that are needed. So basically, you have to implement this, I'll say, like a side procurement policy for when you do any purchases related, they are funded by federal grants.
Okay. So Marcia, did we just update our ordinance to meet
Yes.
that requirement? Or
I believe it's at, so the Finance Committee approved it, and then I believe it went to admin.
Yeah.
We're having a public hearing on it on January 26th.
Yep. Okay, good. Very good. Tim, I saw you had your hand up, Councilor Ryan, and you're mute. Tim, you're mute.
No, sorry. Yeah, I was at one of my family members was trying to get my attention, so I was just letting him know I was on the phone call. Sorry.
Okay. So everybody's pictures, at least in my display, are really small. So if anybody else had questions, please just speak up because I can't see anybody who's waving their hands.
I stopped
that's
sharing
better.
just so you can see everybody.
Yeah, good, good.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was still sharing.
No other comments? Mayor, anything?
No, I'm good. We, Marcia and I had reviewed the audit prior to its final submission, and Marcia made the comments that were needed, and no, I think it looked good. It's very positive.
All right, thank you. So all in all, a very good audit. Over the years, we've had, I can never remember the lingo, but we have had findings or material weaknesses or whatever you call them. And this is, I think, the first year that we have not. And I want to thank the finance director as well as Matt and Nikoleta for guiding us through that. We've made an effort to respond back in the past, recent past, to findings regarding what we've done about those findings. And I would like us to continue that process because we still have a couple of, it's just at this point we're constructive criticism or suggestions, if you will, recommendations. But a couple of things have repeated from last year. So I would ask that we work to provide a letter back to CLA regarding what we're doing to correct those or choose not to implement those recommendations. Either way, I would like to see us write back about what we're doing in response. So thank you very much. Excellent report. And thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Nikoleta, for all your hard work, as well as the general government and the Board of Ed.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to move on, and we have a lot of folks here. Roxanne, I think I've gotten everybody who's joined us more recently. I've added to the roll call.
Yeah, I have to stop with us as well. I don't know if you saw him.
Yep, I did. So,
Okay.
welcome Jay, welcome John, and Paul Mogul are the recent folks joining. So I'm going to move on, and if the Board of Ed folks don't want to sit and listen to the rest of this meeting, you're perfectly welcome to stay or leave. I want to thank you for coming. We appreciate that the Board of Ed comes to these readouts because it's important that we all hear this. So thank you for coming. And with that, I will move on and accept a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of 2 weeks ago.
So moved, Counselor Ryan.
Counselor Ingalls, second.
Thank you. Any questions, corrections?
Well, I saw a couple typos, but nothing substantive.
Okay. They never are. Thank you. Ready to vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Counselor Ingalls votes
Aye.
aye.
Sorry.
We're good. No, you're good.
And Councilor Solomon votes aye, so the motion passes. And we're going to move on to old business. And I do plan to work on the ARPA funds this time.
Bill, are you skipping the finance director's report?
Yeah.
Yes, I always do. I just wait for somebody to remind me.
There you go. So reminded.
Thank you. Marcia, you're mute.
Oh, you didn't hear what I just said then. Good,
Good.
because I had second thoughts about what I just said.
Ah,
No, I'm kidding. I am going to be very brief, and then Matt is going to give you the official
great.
finance director's report, because as of the end of the day tomorrow, he will be the official finance director. And I just want to say how absolutely excited and thrilled I am for all of you that you get to work with Matt for hopefully the next 83 years. He's a solid guy, solid with accounting and auditing stuff. He's learning all the other stuff very quickly, and he's a pleasure to work with. So you're all in for a treat. And I also want to thank you guys for working with you for the last however god awful many years. I'm just kidding. And I'll see you through the budget process. And so I'm not going to say goodbye. And I'm now going to turn it over to Matthew.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia. Thanks to Marcia for those.
Sorry,
We're in the same room.
rumble here. Okay.
For the kind words. I'd like to thank the town for the opportunity to take this position. I'm really looking forward to working with everybody. These last 2 weeks have been, it's been a lot to learn, but Marcia is certainly making that transition very easy for me. I do have her cell phone number, so I may be calling her quite often for questions. But moving on, in your packet, there was the budget to date revenue report and the budget to date expenditure report. I just wanted to touch on a few items in there. And as always, if there's questions on those, feel free to reach out to me directly after the meeting or whenever. And I can certainly get an answer for you on any of the questions that you might have. On the revenue side, you'll notice that the pilot grant, the original budget for that grant, the revenue budget was just over 550,000. After the budget was finalized, the state upped that projected revenue to $1,184,000, which has all come in. All that money is in the door now. That's why you've got that huge swing there of 630,000. And then, excuse me, in regards to property taxes, you'll notice that we've collected 56% on the current list year to date. That does not include December collections. We're still processing the December revenue entry, so those will be posted shortly. I can tell you that on the current list, $1.4 million came in December. So the taxes are trending good. On the expenditure side, nothing really out of the ordinary at this point. The total expenditures year to date are under 50% of what's been budgeted. When you're looking at that report, you'll see a column for year-to-date expenditures and encumbrances. It's just important to note that when you're looking at the percentage of the budget remaining, you need to factor in those encumbrances. But the true cash out the door, so to speak, is the year-to-date expenditure number. So like I said, we're under 50% at 6 months through the year of what we budgeted. General government, that doesn't include the Board of Ed. And then I did want to let you to know that the audit RFP went out this year, or I'm sorry, went out this week for the next audit cycle. We believe there's at least 3 respondents that are going to be submitting bids for that. So we're looking forward to that.
Great.
And
Thank you.
That's all I've got.
So we appreciate the overview, Matt, because reading the municipal budget reports is a challenge, as you know, and thank you for helping us through that. And specifically, they're a challenge because of encumbrances. There are things that don't get spent until the very end of the year. Other things that get spent at the beginning of the year, and it throws a lot of the percentages for year to date way off. So they are hard for us to interpret. So we appreciate that summary.
You will notice that for some of the things like insurance, almost the entire budget has been encumbered for that. So the remaining portion of that budget is going to be small.
Yep.
But you really need to look at the expenditure column to get a better picture of where you're at.
Exactly. So, okay. Welcome again, and thank you.
Thank you.
Marcia, thank you for leaving us in good hands and presenting us with good hands too. So we are pleased. I am now going to move on to old business and want to talk about item 1, which is our ARPA funding and the capital improvement plan, and move quickly into the rubric. So starting with item 1, as we've said many times in the past, we want to make sure that there is public input and involvement in how we spend the ARPA funds. One way to do that is to identify as much as possible in our capital improvement plan and move on it through the budget. But there are other items on the list that we need to act on more quickly that won't make it through the budget process. Therefore, we've been looking and watching to see what other towns have been doing, and some of them have held either information sessions or public hearings, and we've talked about doing the same thing. So Roxanne and I spoke today. At our last meeting, Tim, Andra and I agreed that we thought we wanted to go forward with some sort of public input session. But we waited until this meeting when you're back with us. So Roxanne gave me a date Roxanne, was it February 17th? It was a Thursday night?
Yeah, let me just double check. It is a Thursday
Okay.
night and it's in February, so let me just double check that. Yes,
Okay,
February
so
7th is a Thursday.
our thinking was that we don't want to wait too long to do this because we'll be deep in the midst of budget deliberations. So we wanted to get public input sooner rather than later. I want to get both your thoughts on that, Councilors Ingalls and Ryan. And also, we talked about whether we have a public hearing, which is more formal and doesn't involve dialogue. So, people can speak and offer ideas, but they don't really get a response or discussion. Or we could do a public information session where we present the ARPA projects, we explain the rationale, we ask people for their ideas, we actually discuss them in the information session. And in my experience, at least, we use information sessions for past WPCA water projects, and they work very well. The dialogue was much more robust. And I think that's what this process calls for, is dialogue, not so much just a public hearing. So I'll stop and ask you guys for your thoughts.
If I could, unless Andre, you want to go. Okay. So yeah, no, Bill, I'm sure you, as you surmised, I'm fully in favor of involving the public in a information session. As you said, public hearings, the one-way communication is not really going to get what we need. And we've seen other municipalities engage with the constituents in terms of having that dialogue about what projects are their priorities. And perhaps there's ideas we just haven't even thought of or have gotten yet, despite reaching out in the ways that we already have. So yes, I'm fully in favor of an information session. I think that's a good path forward for what we're trying to achieve here, which is having public buy-in on how we're spending these additional funds, these additional one-time funds. So as far as schedule, I guess I would just ask, you intimated at a Thursday. Was there a particular date you were looking at?
Thursday, February 17th.
Okay. We can take this offline. That might be tough for me,
Okay.
based on what I have going on for work.
Yeah.
But we can take it offline and talk about that.
Yeah, we don't have to make a decision on the date tonight.
Right.
We can see who's available. Roxanne's really good about helping us through that.
But thank you. No, that's like I said, I think that's the right path forward,
Okay.
and just having it out in the open.
Okay. Andrea?
I agree. That's a great way to go. And it will give us a chance to help everyone understand the limitations of what we can spend the money on. People might have great ideas that we're just not allowed to spend the ARPA funds on. So I don't have anything particular in mind, but I think it would be mutually beneficial to have that kind of a public informational session.
Yep.
That's actually a great point, Andrea. And any information session we have should absolutely start out with the background on what allowed uses are for the funds. That would at least steer the discussion, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. The one thing well, there are a lot of things we can't spend them on, but the one that jumps out for me is you can't use it to reduce the tax burden. So
right. I'm
sure there are people out there thinking, why don't you just give us the money and lower our taxes? And that's the one thing that we're precluded from doing. So at least we'll get that out there. Okay, I want to move into the rubric. We had talked about, and I don't know if that's the right word, but we talked about how we balance these projects and which ones we pick, which ones we don't, and what are the criteria. So I sent you all a spreadsheet. You have it on your in your program documentation, and I'm going to see if I can share it here. It's a spreadsheet, so it's a little busy, but I'm going to pull it up right now. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I'm just going to cover it the highlights and what my thinking was. On the left side, let me minimize this. Can you see the whole spreadsheet, everybody?
We can see it, but it is very small on my screen. Right. So it's not really, you can see it, but it's not readable.
Yeah.
Right.
Give me a second.
little thing up top, Bill, that says view options. Maybe that'll make it bigger.
No, it's all right.
Right up.
I'll get
okay.
to it. How's that?
That's better.
Still
That's
too
we-
small?
We can read it. Well, I can read it with my glasses on. It's just that now we see it in pieces.
Yeah, you can't see the whole thing. So I'm just going to touch on it briefly. On the left, you'll see the projects. And then over to the right, I added columns to the spreadsheet. So here are the columns. And what I did was add criteria for why we would select any of these projects. I'm just going to read them out. One criteria would be this project is a direct cost of the pandemic. Another criteria is it's an unavoidable present or future cost. In other words, we have to spend it, we don't have a choice. Another criteria is it increases public safety. Another one is it's a benefit to all residents and taxpayers. Another one is benefit to residents and taxpayers in need. Another one supports economic development. And last, saves the town money. And then I assigned weights to each one. I said, and 5 is high, so a rating of 5 I gave to the direct cost of the pandemic because you can't avoid it. Same with unavoidable present or future cost. I gave a weighting of 4 to public safety, 3 to benefits all taxpayers and residents in need, 2 to economic development, and 5 to saves town money. Up for suggestions, you guys can add things, change the weighting. And I don't want to debate it all now, but if it gives you some time to think about it, or propose a completely different scheme, I think that would be really helpful. Those were my thoughts on how we could do this. So I'll stop there and see if there are questions.
Yeah, Bill, this is Tim. I think it looks like, at least to me, that your categories or your criteria, I should say, they look heavily based off of what the guidance is for the funding anyway. So I mean, there's not a lot of nebulous fidelity there. But I think the weighting is interesting. It's something that I am going to look at a little bit more. But I think you have it mostly correct, at least from first blush. This hasn't changed since the first time we've seen it, right?
Nope.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously being a direct cost of the pandemic is going to be one of the biggest items, but as far as the other categories go, I'd like to look at those a little bit more in terms of their weighting. So
Absolutely.
but I think the categories are good though. At least as far as I can see. So
we can add more, we can change the weights, we can take some off, but I just wanted to explain it to you guys because it's not self-explanatory. And then at our next meeting, we can come back and hash out some other ideas.
Right. This might be good fodder for the information session too, when we bring up whatever criteria we end up with, if it's not this, and see if the residents have any other suggestions for criteria we may have not considered.
Exactly.
We've got time to spend this, but not a whole bunch by the time we get around to making appropriations. So.
Exactly. So, okay, very good. That's all I have on that.
Yep.
So I'm going to move to item 3 and ask for a motion under old business item 3.
Andrew, do you want?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Tim. Counselor Ingalls, I move to recommend the town council appropriate $43,270 from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding, as requested by Ledgelight Health District to support initiatives related to the COVID pandemic.
Is there a second?
Second.
So could I interject?
Yes.
There needs to be an account number associated with this to spend the money out of, to appropriate to and spend the money out of. I'd like to give that to you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, it's so you could put it in motion to recommend the town council appropriate $43,270 from the American Rescue Plan Act funding to account 21090305 -53300 -G0014. You'll notice that there is that last 5 digits is what we call a project code.
Okay.
And Matt and I decided that for all the ARPA funding, we're going to assign project codes so what we do with project codes is connect them to both the expenditure and the revenues.
Yep.
And this way it will allow tracking, much better tracking, so that both for the auditors when they come and also when we do the reporting to the federal government,
Great.
we'll have those numbers
Okay.
easily available.
So Roxanne, did you get the whole account number?
Yeah, I'll repeat it back. So Marcia, you said this is coming from account 2109005-53300- G as in George 0014.
Correct.
And it's coming from that account? Is it going to other accounts?
It's being appropriated to that account.
Okay, being appropriated to that account. Okay.
Okay.
Do we have to say where it's coming from?
Could you repeat that, please?
We need the
I
account
said-
it's coming from.
So the ARPA funding was recorded in account in the 0210 fund. So it is currently sitting there in fund balance. And
Okay.
when you appropriate to that account, it will automatically come from fund balance. So you don't need to state specifically where it's coming from because you've already said it's ARPA funding.
Right, got it.
Okay. Andrea, will you accept that as a friendly amendment?
I will.
Okay. Question. Oh, so Tim, we had a presentation and a discussion with Jen Muggio from Ledge Light at 2 weeks ago at the meeting, and she pretty much confirmed what we were thinking. They are adding staff as we suspected, and that's in part what this funding will cover. It's also covering funds as we knew that they had already spent as a result of the pandemic. So she was very forthright. They suspect they may have additional sources of funding by the time these funds are worn down and they still have people on staff, but they don't know, of course, whether they'll have additional sources of funding. And she talked at length about some of the ways that they're actually reducing or retiring some staff. So yes, the additional headcount will stay, but they also have some people leaving and new people will come in at a lower salary. Andrea, anything I missed there?
No, I think you got it.
So that's kind of the dialogue and the discussion we had, Tim. So
Yeah, no, I apologize for not being there.
that's right.
I was the one who brought up some of the issues and wish I was there to hear it. I guess, and I read the agenda item in the background that was in there from the last meeting, but I guess, there's no guarantee here that, we appropriate this 1%, right? And when the funds are exhausted, that our obligation to legislate increases afterwards. That's still my concern. And that really hasn't it's been addressed, but it hasn't been satisfied. So it seems like that, there's no discrete accounting, as you said, for attrition and bringing people in at lower salaries that would necessarily blunt or keep consistent the obligation for municipalities. So that's still a concern of mine. I mean, it's a relatively small concern in the scope of things of what they're asking for. But I guess, and I'm looking at the chat list here, and I'm having IT issues, so I can't, it's not letting me scroll. Jen's not on tonight.
Correct.
No,
Okay, just making sure. I just, because did you happen to get any information about whether or not the oh crap, no, I can't. I can't remember the question I was going to ask. Oh, that's going to bother me.
Well,
I'll get back to it, but I
Okay.
guess the point is that I'm just wondering whether or not we're going to get any more discrete accounting out of this, and I don't think that's really going to happen, right?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. So-
She answered all her questions. Some of the items specifically, Andra asked about the generator, and she
Oh, yeah.
explained what's going on with the generator. They had to make some more space for people. They were doing a reconfigure of the office space, and they decided that having a generator should be part of that as part of the project, not an add-on later. They said that some of the funding was to cover people who needed temporary support because they had no housing. You know, they were ill with COVID. They couldn't live with anyone. They had to find separate housing. There was a small amount of money, but still.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then there were headcount.
I did remember the question I was going to ask, which was, did you happen to get from her if any other municipality had denied the 1%?
We did not ask that question.
Okay, I was just curious
My recollection.
because if, you know, and I haven't seen any news clips or anything like that.
Yeah,
according
I
to
mean,
I can
Marcia's
interject
got
on that
Yeah,
if
go
I
ahead.
may. I don't get to interrupt much longer, so.
that.
My husband's on the legislate board and he has reported that no other town has turned down the request.
I was just curious. Yeah. Thank you, Marcia.
Just a quick
I'm all
part,
set though. Thank you.
probably on Tim's comment. The legislate workers are unionized. So in terms of their ability to constrict after the pandemic, I would say it could be questionable. It would pose a challenge when you're dealing with a bargaining unit as to whether you can shed part of your workforce or not. So it's just something they're gonna have to consider.
It's also an option of each town to leave the district. And Ledyard has considered that in the past. And actually, we got some leverage and we got some action as a result of our vote on that several years ago. So we're not completely held to the grindstone on this. And on the other hand, Ledge Light is a perfect example of regionalization. And you know, the combination of the good associated with regionalizing and not having to pay for our own health people to address a pandemic, and the fact that we have an ongoing pandemic, of course, costs are going to go up. So I don't think I think we're all in agreement. We don't have total control over this, but they also need some help and some support because, as mentioned, they've incurred some costs and they've done some great things for the community in combating this pandemic. So my personal opinion is we should allocate the funds.
So I'm curious, Tim, do you have any ideas? Do you have any suggestions about, would anything make this more palatable? Offering less than the 1%. I will say the one argument that is unpersuasive to me is that the funds are already spent. Because again, what I said a couple weeks ago was, you know, considering this and this according to the same standards we would ask of any of our own department heads, which, like, to the generator question, you know, was this something that you had planned on buying? So that the money's already spent. If one of our department heads came to us and said, well, I need extra money because we already spent it, we would say, well, that's not how this works. So, you know, I think that their request that they requested is appropriate and that we should contribute. I still feel like, I don't know, maybe a little bit less. I don't know. They're just to go into it with some unanswered questions feels. I'm not 100% confident. I'm mostly confident in a yes vote, but I'm not 100% confident.
Yeah, to directly answer your question, Andra, I probably wouldn't advocate for less than 1% since that's what they're asking for all the other municipalities that are in the district. I'm not sure that would be fair. So I guess that was never even considered in my train of thought. But I guess, what comes to mind is, how excellent, how much of an excellent presentation we had from the fire department, right? About how their retirement of assets and bringing assets on board, new assets. And, they had an entire history of how they were going to be spending the additional capital money that they were requesting, right? And that's one of our own departments. So we would expect that. But again, I mean, this funding is not a recurring funding source. So I'm personally sensitive to that. And, from the beginning, I've always said that I'm not fully in favor of funding uses for ARPA money that represent potential recurring expenses. Because then we put ourselves up against a wall for items that will be on the hook to support after these ARPA funds are expended. So personally, I mean, I'd like to see this funding go towards, uses for ledge light that are not bolstering recurring expenses, or if they are, showing that is offset by something else, to a reasonable degree, obviously, because costs do increase over time, especially in the health arena. So I am also sensitive to that, but there's a balance there. So that's where my head is at right now.
Understood. I share the concern about the generator. I wasn't part of the discussion about do they need a generator or how they made the decision, but in the grand scheme of all the money that they're asking from all the towns, the generator was a very small part.
Right.
The big ones are the head count, and I get it. We're fighting a pandemic. Maybe in the best possible scenario, they don't have to fight the pandemic forever. That would be nice. So,
I guess I would ask Bill, did you get from Jen whether or not there was a need date for this funding in terms of when they need it by?
I don't recall getting a date. Mayor, maybe
Okay.
you or Marcia. I haven't heard one.
No,
Right.
I don't recall that being said, and a number of them have been just kind of outstanding. This request being one of them. So I think it's just kind of standing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've had it for a number of months too.
Mhm.
So I don't really want to drag it out. And
Mhm.
if we're going to say yes, I'd rather say yes and be done with it.
Right. So what I'd like to do, I'm of the opinion of voting yes to put it to the full council for discussion. But with the caveats that I've already stated, I guess what I'd like to understand by the time it gets to full council is whether or not we will have available to us more discrete accounting of how these expenses are going to play out over the next few years, and whether or not, understanding, as they stated, they cannot predict what's going to happen in 4 years, but we need some reasonable assurances that everything's going to be done to keep the expenses neutral as much as possible.
Yep.
So
I'll make that request, Jim,
Mhm.
thank you.
and hopefully we'll have something by next week. Okay, you guys ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye, Counselor Ingalls.
Councilor Ryan votes aye.
Councilor Solomon votes aye. The motion passes, and we will recommend it to the town council next week. So Mr. Paul Mogul has been patiently waiting for item 4. I will entertain an item or a motion under old business item 4.
So moved, Counselor Ryan.
I think you need to read the whole motion, Tim.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I thought I move to recommend the town council approve to issue a refund in the amount of $500 to Mr. Paul Mogul, 827 Colonel Ledyard Highway, Ledyard, for a fee charged for a zoning board of appeals number 962.
Second, Counselor Ingalls.
Thank you. So the background on this is that it's been through land use. Land use recommended refunding or issuing the refund less $60, which is we can't get back from the state. And then we had a long discussion about it, and it appears we found out that there's more information out there. We have a letter from our attorney. We also have information from our planner, and we just received that in our email this evening as this meeting was starting. I asked for a motion because I want to leave it up to you guys whether we act on it or not, but my inclination is to continue to table it until we have an opportunity to read the two letters and then discuss. And I did let Mr. Mogul know that via the chat that I didn't think we would be moving on this, but I wanted to open it up to you guys if you think differently.
Apologies about the late sending. I somehow didn't think it was tonight, so. I
So
should have
that
had it
was
to you yesterday.
Town Planner Juliet Hodge.
I think that's a fair assessment, Bill.
Okay.
I do too. Yeah, same.
Okay, all right, so we will hold this. At this point, we can, Tim, you can withdraw the motion, or I think it would be better to table it.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, we would need a motion to table.
Right.
So moved.
I'll second the motion.
Second.
Okay, so all in favor of tabling the motion?
Aye, Counselor Ingalls.
Counselor Ryan votes aye.
And Counselor Solomon votes aye as well. Mr. Mogul, I apologize. Yes, Mr. Mogul just chatted. Can you post the letters as part of the record? They should be on the agenda now if you refresh your screen, if you're looking at it online. But yes, they have been posted to the agenda. So again, apologies for how long this is taking. And with that, is there any other old business? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion number one under new business.
I make a motion to recommend the town council approve to appropriate $6,500 received from the sale of surplus items through Gov Deals to account 210-20101-55248 Police Forfeiture Reserve Account.
Second, Counselor Ryan.
Thank you. So I want to thank Chief Rich, who's been with us for now over an hour, waiting for this motion. We always like to receive money. This was a Cadillac Escalade, which was seized several years ago in a drug deal. And we've finally gotten clear title and sold it through govdeals.gov. So Mayor, Chief Rich, anything to add?
I thank the chief for working diligently to get us a clear title so we could finally sell that vehicle. But even though it sat as long as it did, it drew, I think it was 85 bids ultimately. So everybody was very impressed to see what this ultimately went for. And I think it's, again, another testament to how broad we have made our audience in terms of surplus sales, and it's generating a lot more money than our sealed bid kind of quote unquote local only sales.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I looked it up myself. It had 183,000 miles. So if you're thinking $6,500 for a Cadillac is a pretty good deal, it had a lot of miles on it. So who knows how it was treated, but yeah, we got a lot more than we would have if this weren't on Gov Deals. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief Rich. Chief Rich, anything to add?
Just as an aside, just do great work by my officers in the course of that, and seized a high quantity of fentanyl that could have taken out a lot of people. And then in addition, the federal prosecution that ensued from that. And this was it did take a number of years, but this is the final outcome is we were able to get the vehicle as an asset, a seized asset, and then get the title cleared through the Department of Motor Vehicles. And I want to thank the mayor and everyone else involved, and Marsha for the assistance, and Roxanne as well for helping me once again with navigating the FBR system. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Chief. Good work. Okay, guys, questions?
No questions.
Ready to vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye, Counselor Ingalls.
Counselor Ryan votes aye.
And Counselor Solomon votes aye, and the motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
I move to recommend the town council transfer $75,000 to account 2101-4301, TAC 53342, TAC T001, Town Green Upgrade from account 2109-0305, TAC 58915, undesignated, to increase the town match portion of the Town Green Upgrade project.
Is there a
Second, Counselor Ingalls.
Okay, Mayor?
Yeah, so I'll give a quick cover on this one. So when we submitted this grant application, I believe it was July of 2019. 2019 or 2020. It was a while ago. I think it was 2019. We were awarded in February, I believe it was, of 2020. And that's why it's a steep grant 2020. Here we are, fast forward, we are now in January of 2022, in the midst of a pandemic. And as you can imagine, the estimates that we had for the cost of the services, labor, and of course, materials at that time have skyrocketed. An average increase was about 20% overall. So increased costs just drove this project. And we can't go back to the state for additional steep money. We are only allowed to move small quantities within the project scope. So if picnic tables, as an example, came in a little high, but parking lot lights came in a little bit low, we could adjust or shift those remaining parking lot light dollars over to the table line, but we can't make wholesale changes to change what the ultimate scope of the project was. So we had to increase what we're willing to spend, understanding that all of the sourcing of these goods, materials, and even the labor has come in markedly higher.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilors, questions?
I just had one. Is this a good use for ARPA funds?
Well, that's a good question. That is a good question. It very well could be. It could certainly be a consideration. I guess it kind of comes down to timing of some of these things.
Right. Yeah.
So depending on, if the town council is to have a public informational session sometime in February and maybe it wends its way through the process in March, I don't know. I'd have to talk to Steve Maslin, who Steve and Juliet are kind of spearheading this, but I can ask him about timing for sure. I don't think it would be a problem if you didn't want to act on it tonight. I don't think it's a problem if it came up at the second finance meeting of February. Yeah, first one of February. I'm sorry.
So, Mayor, I had the same thought, especially if the grant for the sewer line is approved. We should have funds available still in ARPA to cover this. I'm pretty sure. And I hate to take money from undesignated. So my question would be, maybe we take it from ARPA, and if let's say we don't have the ARPA funds because the grant doesn't come through or something else, could we later transfer from undesignated back into the ARPA fund, or basically use a different source of funds later?
So yeah, that from not an accounting perspective, but from an auditing perspective from the federal government, which ultimately audited, is probably a little bit dicey.
Yeah.
Probably not the best, but just in starting to read the final guidance from the federal government on ARPA funding, it's opened it up dramatically for uses. So I certainly don't see this as a concern for use, because one of the new uses now is to, as an example, to if we had revenue streams that had declined as a result of COVID, we could actually use ARPA funding for that now, which wasn't the case before. So as we read more of this document, there are more uses, but yeah, I don't think that this would be an issue. And I think that in the $4.3 million picture for the ARPA funds, this would probably fit nicely in there.
Yeah.
So, Mayor, if I could ask, what is, again, you said timing is always an issue, right? So what is the timing for the need for these funds for the town green upgrade?
So we're trying to get everything done before the quote unquote season starts. So understanding that the first week of June, the farmers market begins, and then they're consistently using it. But generally speaking, from late May through September, probably, well, certainly October, it's going to be in use. So we're trying to get as much of this work done as we can ahead of that season.
Right.
Juliet,
So it sounds like,
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, so if we take action on this sometime in the March timeframe, ultimately at council, that shouldn't represent too much of an issue?
Juliet's going to say something. I mean, part of it is we do have to follow state bidding guidelines. So,
Okay.
you know, RFPs and things like that do take time. And then it's a matter of, which is why we brought the poured concrete floor for the pole barn earlier, because we also acknowledge that contractors start queuing up their work. And if we're not there quickly enough, their slate will be full for the summer, and they'll say, well, we can do this in November 10th, which isn't exactly ideal for us. So we're trying to get things lined up as early as possible so that we have contractors that we want that are bidding. A great example would be the high school bathrooms not too long ago, that when we were up against the wall and trying to get a couple of those banks of bathrooms done in the summer with a small window of time, the cost was astronomical, because the contractors were kind of like, well, if you need us to do it, you're going to pay us handsomely. When they went in for the second and third banks of bathrooms and they had far more time to bid it, those numbers came in much different. But Julia, if you want to jump in, feel free.
So the documents I have in front of me do have a time frame. The grant term is 2 years with a one-time extension not to exceed a year. But the main thing in here is that the municipal match that is required has to be municipal funds. It cannot come from any other state or federal grant. So I'm not sure if the ARPA counts as a federal grant or a state grant, but it's intended to be money that was budgeted for it, basically, that comes out of your budget. So you can double check on the ARPA thing. I don't know how they are classifying this money, because it's new. I know that it is allowed for a match on a DECD grant, so you'd have to look into that, but there is a time frame for this grant.
Yeah, we'll do some looking, because there was a conversation at a CCM meeting that I was at recently where they were talking about some ARPA funds are now allowed to be used for grant purposes. So yeah, I think we're probably best if we put this off to the next finance meeting We'll find out, we'll get through the 440 pages of the final congressional rule. And we can better understand how we can fully utilize these funds.
And the grant was awarded in May of 2021, so you have till May of 2023.
Yeah, May of 23, right? Yep, okay.
So Tim, you're the motion maker. What do you want to do? You want to table?
Well, I just wanted to thank the mayor for that background. And yeah, I think, let me just be clear that I'm in favor of getting these funds, obviously, that we need to do the town green upgrade. But like you, Bill, this is a one-time expense. I'd rather see it come out of a revenue source that is not the undesignated fund balance, because this would represent, what, 20% of that balance. So appreciate the legwork, Mayor. And I guess I will move to. You want me to table this bill to the next finance meeting?
Makes sense to me, but it's your call. You made the motion.
All right. Well, I'll move to table the motion to the next finance meeting.
I'll second.
Oh,
All
go
right,
ahead.
Andre, you got it. Okay, all in favor of the motion to table, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, Councilor Ryan.
And Councillor Solomons votes aye as well. The motion is tabled. And we have no other business, so I will end the meeting here if someone wants to make a motion.
So moved.
We are adjourned without exception at 6:26 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a good evening.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
All right.
And the PMBC meeting